All right. Continuing chapter 16 here. How the owner sees their home, how they see their home value when selling. Remember, I told you that the appraiser is important because that house is going to serve as collateral for the loan. Real estate agents, we help value homes by doing a CMA, using supportable evidence to help guide sellers to the true current value of their home. And sellers often have unrealistic expectations of the value of their homes when selling, and we can make it, and that can make it difficult for us as licensees to reason with them uh, to list at a realistic price. So that's a challenge that we need to overcome there. All right, so let's go over the appraisal, the cost approach, the appraisal by some, also known as the appraisal by summation. Um, and the cost approach is based on substitution. Remember where the cost of a property is set by cost of purchasing another? Well, using the cost approach to value of a special purpose, unique or one of a kind public property that may not have comparables or generate income in the normal fashion, like schools, churches, and libraries, city hall, or a custom unique home. The approach most often used by appraisers, not by salespeople, due to the knowledge required in order to do this. However, you're still going to get a math problem probably on your state exam that's going to need, or yeah, we don't have them on a school. You're going to have one on your state exam most likely, having to figure out the value based on the cost approach. So I'm going to walk you through that process of what an appraiser goes through. So the appraisal by summation or the cost approach, like once again, we'll probably never use this, but you need to know it for exams. So it's an estimate. First step is you estimate the value of the land without any improvements on it at its highest and best use. What is the highest and best use? Do you recall? Highest and best use. What is that? Nothing?
Would it be for without its highest best use?
It's
So the purposes of the house prop of the property? No.
well, yeah, it's the purpose of the property, but the most valuable use or use that'll be in most in demand in the reasonably near future is its highest and best use. Okay. But make sure you write that term down. You need to know that one for exam too. Highest and best use. And then, so basically, you try to determine the value of the land put to its highest and best use, the most profitable use that it could be adapted to, or use that's most going to be in demand for that land in the reasonably near future. Then you estimate the current cost to construct all the site improvements using replacement or reproduction cost approaches. Oh, what is replacement and reproduction cost? Well, let's first do these highlights here, and then we'll get to all of that. So this is spread out across 311 and 312. What the cost approach is and how they come about figuring it out with these 5 steps. Let's just do that. And then we'll continue on with those steps. So far, we're on step 2.
Okay, I got it.
Okay, everybody
Not
got it?
not yet. Hold on. And I got it.
All right, so the appraisal by summation using the cost approach to value, we got to first estimate the value of the land without the improvements. If it were put to its highest and best use, the most valuable use that it could be used for, or the most demanded use in the reasonably near future. Then you estimate the cost to construct all the site improvements to construct that building on the property. Now, how do you determine that? Well, you got to use either replacement or reproduction cost approach. And we don't know. This is something left to the appraisers because we as real estate agents, we don't know this process on how do you how do you determine the cost to construct a building? That's a little bit beyond the scope of the real estate agent. So, what is the cost reproduction versus cost approach? Well, cost approach to rebuild the structure can use two different estimations. The reproduction cost, which is the cost to build an exact duplicate of the subject building at today's current prices, or the replacement cost, which is the cost to construct a new building that would serve the same purpose, but is not necessarily an exact duplicate. Think of it for a second that you got a property that has all high-end appliances and countertops, custom cabinetry in your kitchen, a reproduction cost would replace it exactly as it was. Replacement costs would replace it with just some regular standard cabinets and maybe some linoleum countertops. Maybe not replace it with the granite ones that were there before. It'll still serve the same purpose. You have a countertop where you can cut and prepare your food and have your toaster and such, but it's not going to be exact duplicate. Now, which approach would appraisers use? Well, insurance companies use the same methods here. They send out an insurance adjuster to determine the value of a claim that they're going to pay out. Here's a little tip for you. You can always hire your own personal private adjuster that works for you to try and get you more money out of the insurance company when you're doing a claim. Because the one the insurance company sends out works for them. Okay. A private adjuster is one that would work for you. All right, that's a little tip for you. They could probably get you more money out of the insurance company if you ever had to do an insurance claim. All right. You guys got the highlights?
Yeah, I got it.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah.
The next step is they would estimate the accrued depreciation of that improvement that was built, because that wasn't a new building that just you're trying to replace right now or reproduce. It was an older building. So you have to estimate the accrued depreciation for that improvement. So what is depreciation? Anybody know what that term depreciation means?
The loss in value.
Yeah, it's a loss of value due to any cause or condition. And as a general rule, land does not depreciate. Only in extreme circumstances like contamination and things of that nature. Otherwise, as a general rule, land doesn't depreciate. There are curable and incurable forms of depreciation. You have physical deterioration, which can be cured with repairs. The building may be rotting because the wood is old or it got termites or whatever. And then you have functional obsolescence. Okay. What does it mean if something is functional, but it's obsolete? Functional obsolescence. I'm doing it this way instead of showing you guys the definition. I don't want you guys to look at it in a book either. If you just look at it this way, I'm going to show you how you could figure out, even if you forget the definition of what it is. Let's just examine the term functional obsolescence. What does it mean if something is functional?
It's in working condition.
Yeah, it works. And if it's obsolete, which is the root word from obsolescence, what does that mean?
Not working
No,
properly.
obsolete.
It's like exclusive.
Obsolete means it's dated. Like like you may have an old computer that's slow as hell. It's obsolete technology. It's old. There's much newer stuff,
Outdated.
you know. So something that's functional means that that it works, but it's outdated or not considered desirable by people today. Let me give you an example of a real estate that would be functionally obsolete. A 5-bedroom, 1-bathroom house. You guys see anything wrong with that?
Yeah, the
What's
ratio to the bedroom and bathroom.
Well,
There's
what's wrong with
5
it?
bedrooms
There was one
and
point in time that people were happy just that they had indoor plumbing, that they didn't have to go outside to go. You know what I'm saying? So, but outdoor plumbing, having an house, that was once a luxury, but from the times when you had to go, uh, you know, bend over a line to go to the bathroom, you know, uh, now we had an outhouse place where you could sit down and do it in privacy. And now that's outdated. Now we got indoor plumbing, but now that's not enough. Now we got people who get 2 bedrooms and they want 2.5 baths. So a 5-bedroom house with only 1 bath, oh yeah, that's considered outdated by today's standard. So that's just an example of functional obsolescence, but can that be cured? Yeah, you could put in another bathroom, right?
Yes, yeah.
So functional obsolescence means there's nothing wrong with the property other than its features are considered to be outdated and undesirable by today's standards. Look, that 5-bedroom, 1-bathroom, just that 1 bathroom can be big, it can be beautiful. It recently remodeled, high end, but it's still just 1 bathroom. So it's considered functionally obsolete by today's standards. People don't want to wait in line to go to the bathroom. So it's functional, but it's obsolete. Now, external obsolescence, let's try to figure out what that means. If something's external, what does that mean? Something is external.
Of the property.
the
It's outside of the property. It's something that's not in the property that makes the property considered obsolete for some reason. So it's also known as economic or locational obsolescence because the local economy can make your property obsolete if something negative is happening in your local economy. It could make your property undesirable in that area. Right? Oh, that whole area just recently got flooded, or that whole area is contaminated in some way, or something to that nature. So something that's not on the subject property that could affect the value or desirability. So items not on the subject property, external to the site. However, they do have an effect on the property's value or desirability. So this type of obsolescence is almost always incurable because you have no control over factors that are going on in someone else's property or the local economy. Oh, did you guys want to snap a picture of this one with these explanations?
got it.
I got it as well.
Okay, so depreciation. So now let's do those highlights for those things here in the book.
I'm good.
Okay, everybody got it?
Yes, I got it.
So we did, first step was we estimated the value of the land without the improvements. If it were put to its highest and best use, the use that's most in demand in the reasonably near future, or the most valuable purpose. Then we estimate the cost to construct the building, the site improvements. And then we estimate the accrued depreciation for the age of the building and other factors. Then we deduct that depreciation from the estimated cost of that new building, not the value of the land, because land does not depreciate. You cannot depreciate the value of land except in extreme circumstances like contamination or something that makes it unusable. And then add back the estimated land value to the depreciated building value to get the current value of that property. Okay. Now we're going to go over the income approach to value. The income approach to value, you could use two approaches. Well, actually, maybe three, but generally two approaches that we're going to go over. So let's just highlight the income approach to value. Let's see. Or income capitalization approach to value is based on the present worth of future rights to income. So you're going to be estimating the rate of return of an investor's money. This is called the capitalization or cap rate. So we're going to learn about how to calculate cap rates. To do that, we're going to need some information. And I got some on the side here. You may want to make these notes on the margin of your book there on page 314. Now, and remember, always base off the annual figures. You're going to need to have the GOI, that's the gross operating income. I know, income, expenses, but they always refer to it as the gross expenses, operating expenses. So GOI is gross operating income. You're going to need to know the annual gross operating income. You're going to need to figure out the annual gross operating expenses of the property. And then you subtract the expenses from the income and you're left with the NOI. That's the net operating income. All right. And then once you have these figures, you could plug them into the T formula. The annual net operating income, the annual NOI, goes on top of the T formula. The property value on one side and the cap rate on the other. Okay, so any two of these three figures you need in order to figure out the other. Like if you have the annual NOI and the cap rate you want to achieve, you could figure out the property value or offer you want to make on it. But if you have the annual NOI and the property value, you could figure out the rate of return on an investor's money, that cap rate. I'll give you guys a minute. Take these notes, write down these T formula and the GOI, GOE, and NOI there. And that little formula, GOI, income versus expenses equals the net. I mean, we already know that income minus expenses equals the net. We're writing here annual GOI minus the annual GOE equals the annual NOI, net operating income.
Okay.
Okay. Everybody got it? Is anybody still writing, or
I got it.
anybody need more time? Everybody got it? Okay. So, come on. The income approach to value is based on the present worth of future rights to income. It's used for valuing any property that generates income. Apartment buildings, office buildings, shopping centers, multifamilies, ones you rent and you make income off of. Using two common approaches, either cap rates or the GRM, the gross rent multiplier. So cap rate is short for capitalization rate. It's a measurement that determines the rate of return on an investor's money. The gross rent multiplier, or GRM, this compares two income-producing properties to determine the value when the financial information isn't readily available to figure out the cap rate. So we can make an educated guess to come up with a price range using the information from another property that we may have all the info for. And then we have something called the GIM, the gross income multiplier. It's basically the gross rent multiplier plus factoring in income from other non-real estate related sources, like a concession stand selling T-shirts and hot dogs or whatever, So that's additional income that's not just coming from the rent. So we're not going to really focus too much on this one. We're going to focus on cap rate and gross rent multiplier. So here's the formulas for figuring out cap rates, and here's the formula for figuring out the gross rent multiplier. The GRM uses the reverse T formula. I already taught you guys about the T formula up here. Small number goes up top, large number on one side, and a percentage or rate goes on the other. And when figuring out cap rates, you always use the annual net income. That's the small number that goes up top. Now, the reverse T formula, what is reversed is that the large number goes up top and the small number goes down bottom. However, that small number is not an annual net income. It's the gross monthly income. You don't need to know what the expenses are. You just need to know what the income is. And on the other side is the multiplier, which is not a percentage. It is a whole number. So a whole number, a multiplier is just a whole number that's used to compare two things. In this case, it's going to be two properties. Now, when using the gross rent multiplier, you must compare similar types of buildings. A 2-unit building to a 2-unit building, a 3-unit building to another 3-unit building, a 4-unit building to another 4-unit. You can't compare a 3-unit building to a 4-unit building. It won't work, okay? You have to be comparing apples to apples here. And then if you have all the information on one property where you could figure out the investor's cap rate, the rate of return on their money, but you don't have all that information to figure it out on the other property. You could figure out the property that you have all the information on, figure out the cap rate, and then figure out what the GRM is on it, that multiplier. And then apply that multiplier to the other property that's similar, that you don't have all the information for. And you could still get in the correct ballpark figures. So it's not an exact tool, this gross rent multiplier, but it is a tool that's very handy so you don't have to go signing non-disclosure agreements to find out what the finances are of a property just to see if it's one you even want to show to your client. This way you could kind of guesstimate the numbers a little bit by doing this formula here, by first figuring out a cap rate on a similar property in the area and then figuring out its multiplier, and then applying that multiplier to the property that you're wanting to show that is similar. And then you could get into the ballpark with your figures. It's a real time saver. We are going to do math problems on this so that you fully understand it. But in the meantime, I just want you to write these down or snap a picture of this. The gross rent multiplier, that's the reverse T formula. It only works on GRM problems, but it works the same way. TGIF, the top number goes in the calculator first, then you divide down and multiply across to get your correct answer. Okay? And remember, what is reversed in the T formula? Well, the large number goes up top instead of on bottom, like with the regular T formula. And the small number is gross monthly income instead of a net annual. And in the cap rate, a percentage goes over here, but it's not a percent on the reverse T formula, it's a whole number. I just want you guys to know the formulas and how they work. I don't care about the math because you could use a calculator. So I want you guys just to know the formulas. All right. So the income approach to value, once again, is based on the present worth of future rights to income used for valuing any property that generates income. Apartment buildings, office buildings, shopping centers, multifamilies, using two common approaches, either cap rates or GRM. So the cap rate measures the rate of return on that investor's money using the T formula. So you're going to need any two of these three items to figure it out. The annual NOI, the value, or the cap rate. So you need any two of those numbers, any two of these three numbers to figuring out the missing component that you're trying to solve. And to figure out the annual NOI, you get the GOI, gross operating income. That's all annual income before expenses. Then you figure out the gross operating expenses. That's all the expenses except for debt services, like the mortgage loan. You cannot count that because that is going to be different from one owner to the next. And then the net operating income, the annual net operating income, is calculated by taking the gross operating income, subtracting the gross operating expenses to get the net, the NOI. We'll figure out the numbers we need once again for that GRM on the next slide. So the GRM used to determine value by comparing two similar income generating properties. You can't compare a 4-unit building to a 5-unit building. Using a whole number, not a percentage, called a multiplier, which is an insignificant number in itself. There's no such thing as a good or a bad multiplier. It's just a number used to compare two similar income producing properties when you have info for one but not both of them. It's a way to take a calculated, educated guess. All right. I say whole numbers, the gross rent multiplier, there's no such thing as a good or bad multiplier. Unlike with the cap rates, the higher the number, the higher the return on the investor's money. Now, you're going to use the reverse T formula to calculate this. We need to know any two of these three figures: the gross monthly income, the value, or the GRM itself, the gross rent multiplier. So you'll need any two of those figures to figuring out the missing component. And then lastly, once again, the GIM, the gross income multiplier, basically is based on calculating the GRM and then adding in revenue from other sources like concessions, stands and such that are generating income that's not coming from the real estate. All right, let's make these notes on page 315. put in there the reverse T formula, TGIF reverse T formula. Top number goes in the calculator first. So draw that T formula there, and you're going to write the property value up top, gross monthly income on one side, and the GRM, which is not a percentage, on the right. And do the highlight, but right here, underline similar properties, 3-unit to a 3-unit, 4-unit to a 4-unit. You cannot compare a 4-unit to a 5-unit because they're not similar. And you'll see why when we actually do the math problem. I first just want to go through all the theory and the explanation, but then we're going to do a couple math problems. Let me know when you got that, please. Check and see if I got this right. Notes.
Okay, I got it. Right. Just looking up to see if I got a updated slide for that. All right, we have balance. Okay. Take a new picture. All right, everybody got that?
Yes.
Okay. So once again, these are the two formulas. If you didn't get it before, grab it now. Got the T formula and the reverse T formula, which is only good for calculating the gross rent multiplier. The regular T formula, it could be used for a lot of different math problems. All right, so reconciliation uses is when the appraiser uses two or more of the three approaches to value and applies it to the same property. So what is reconciliation? You need to add that to your definition list. Don't just pass it by. It's when you apply more than one of the three approaches to value to the same property to figure out which is the best approach to use. And which is the best approach to use would be the most profitable one. So we have that sales comparison approach, the cost approach, and the income approach to value. An appraiser will try to do all three approaches and then determine which is the best approach to use. We as real estate agents now, we use the sales comparison approach, or we may use the income approach. Cost approach, we usually don't use it because we don't have the knowledge to figure it out. So let's highlight reconciliation here on page 316. Got that line highlighted? Come on, don't make me ask every,
Done.
yeah. Just tell me guys every time, so I don't have to ask for it every time, please. 'Cause that adds to the delay. All right, so once again, T formula, small number on top, large number on one side, and the percentage or rate goes on the other. And for calculating, using it to calculate different kinds of things, like if we're calculating cap rates, we go down here to number 3. You need the net annual income goes up top. Number 3, the market value on one side, and number 3, the cap rate on the other. You see how those are the 3 figures you need to figure it out. So this is the T formula and 5 different things that you could use it for. So here's a question. They don't give you this T formula on the exam. They just give you this. If you charge the seller 6% commission and the total commission collected was $21,600, how much did the property sell for? Well, on your scrap paper, you would need to know the T formula. You write the T formula and you fill in the numbers. Now, we're trying to figure out how much the property sold for. So that's going to be a lot more than the commission. So we know that the commission is the small number, so it goes on the top of the T formula. And the percentage goes on the other side. And now we divide down. Remember, TGIF, top number, goes in the calculator first to figure out how much the property sold for. So how much did the property sell for?
360,000.
There you go, 360,000. Doesn't that make it so much easier to figure out?
Yeah, much easier.
Because you're not plugging in numbers or trying at random trying to see if they match one of the multiple choice answer options they give you. Here's another problem using the same figures, really. If a house sold for 360,000 and the agent charged 6% commission, how much would the total commission be? Well, you multiply across. T formula makes it easy to figure out how to figure out the answer by just plugging the numbers in to this T formula. And then you could see you just need to multiply 360,000 times 6%, which is also converted to a whole number. You could just cross out the percent sign and go 2 decimal points to the left. So 6.06 is also a way of expressing 6%. So if your calculator doesn't have a percent symbol, you would do that. 360,000 times 0.06 or 6 and then hit the percent symbol. And you get drum roll. What'd you get?
21,600.
See, easy peasy. All right, let's figure out a cap rate problem now. Our first. So the cap rates use the income approach to value. This is one of the income approach to value using cap rates. The question would read, if a property sells for $400,000 with 3 units that rent for $1,200 a month each, with the following expenses, what would the cap rate be? Well, what's the first step we got to do? What figure do we need to put in the T formula? Do we have any numbers that we
The
can put in?
The small number.
Well, which number do we have any numbers now that we could put in here?
No,
Any math yet?
no.
You don't? What number goes down here? What's the large number?
The amount it sells for 400,000.
Oh, so we do got a number we could put in there. Okay. So we
Oh,
put
I
that,
thought you meant on top.
yeah, no, well, no, anywhere in the T formula. Do we have any
Oh, okay.
that we could fill in
Yeah,
there?
the 400,000.
Yeah, okay, so the 400,000 will go down the bottom. And then the number that we put up top is what?
The number at the top goes for $100,000.
No, the 400,000 goes on the bottom for the regular T formula. The small number goes
And the
on top.
top one would be a smaller number, like the commission.
So what would the smaller number be for figuring out the cap rate?
Net,
It's the annual net operating income. So how do we calculate the net operating income? How do we calculate that?
So 1,200 times 12.
Well, just tell me, forget about the numbers. I just want you to explain to me, how do we calculate the net income?
the monthly rent. Time
Well, what
for the year.
is net? What is the net? What does net mean? It's the income after expenses. And to calculate cap rates, we need the annual income after expenses. So first step is we got to figure out what our gross operating income is, the gross operating income. And how do we do that? Well, there's 3 units renting for $1,200 a month each. So what do we do? How do we calculate the income? If we have 3 units renting for $1,200 a month each, what do we do to calculate the income? Just walk me through it.
Three times 1,200.
Okay, and that gives you the monthly gross income. But what figure we got to put up here? It's the annual. So then what do we do? How do we calculate the annual income?
Multiplied by 12.
Yeah. So 3 times 1,200 to figure out the monthly, because there's 3 units renting for $1,200 a month each. That's 3,600. And then you times that by 12. But you got to put the net income here. So that's the gross income. So now we need to add all the annual expenses here, except for the mortgage payment, because we don't calculate the financing cost, the mortgage, because that'll be different from one person to the next, one owner to the next. So we calculate cap rates with adding up all the annual expenses. So any ones that we have here that are monthly or quarterly, just convert them to annual. Quarterly, there's 4 quarters in a year, so 300 times 4, that's 1,200. You know, I already figured out all the annual, converting them all to annual expenses here. So let's just add up all these annual expenses except for the mortgage debt services here. And then we're going to subtract that from the income. So gross operating income minus gross operating expenses will give you the net. So the gross operating income is $43,200 a year. Take that 3,600 times it by 12, you get 43,200. If you add up all the expenses, you get 16,560, which gives you a net operating income of 26,640. You all following me?
Yeah.
Yeah,
You're also so all of the expenses, that's including property taxes and water.
The expenses except for the mortgage debt services, you know.
Okay.
You know, property insurance, everything. All those are all expenses. Those are realistic expenses. If you own real estate, these are all realistic expenses you got to spend money on, right?
Yes.
So you got to subtract them from the rents that you collect to get the net. And now you know that you could put the 400,000 down here, and then the net goes up top. And then you divide down to figure out the cap rate. So what is the cap rate you got on this property then? 26,640 divided by 400,000, and you get what?
got 0.06.
Oh.
So I mean, yeah, 6.6. Yeah, that.
6.6. Okay, it should be the cap rate. Mhm. Which that's not a bad return on your investment. 6.6% back on your money. All right. So you guys see now how to calculate cap rates? Because I'm going to have you do one on your own. All right, so here we take that cap rate now, and we're going to try to figure out the GRM for that same property that we just figured out the 6.6% cap rate for, where the value is 400,000 and the gross monthly income was 3,600 from those 1,200 a month unit rentals. So what numbers do we plug in where here to figure out the GRM? This is the reverse T formula for figuring out GRM. What numbers do we plug in where?
So the value would be 400,000.
Uh-huh. So what
And
is it?
then
Up top, right? See, value goes up top.
mhm.
We
And
got
then
the,
the gross monthly income 336.
and then you get a GRM. What's the GRM you got?
That's 11.1.
Well, I think it's a little bit more than that. You got your 400,000 divided by 3,600. And what do you get?
111.
111.
111.11.
111. Yeah.
Okay. So that's the GRM for that property. Is that difficult to figure out? Especially when you got the reverse T formula and you know what, as long as you know what numbers to plug into the reverse T formula, and you got the calculator in your hand, it's pretty easy to figure out. Just make sure that you punch in the right numbers. All right. So here, this one's a little trickier. If the property for sale is 425,000 with 9,500 a year taxes, 900 a year insurance, annual rents of $28,000 a year, and property expenses at 12,500 a year, what's the GRM for this property? You got to ask yourself a question. What numbers do I need to figure out the GRM?
For the GRM, you need property value at the top
Okay.
and gross monthly income on the bottom left. But
Okay. But what?
so we just plug in what we have for this one.
Well, what's the gross monthly income?
Didn't you have to figure it out since it's at 28 per year?
Well, that's the annual income per year.
Exactly. So you would
So,
have to divide that to find out the monthly.
okay. So let's do that.
So
28,000 annual
20,000,
increments.
it would be $2,333.
There you go. And where do we put that? At the bottom?
You put at the bottom left.
Okay, so 425 up top. The monthly income we put right there.
And
And the
divide
GRM.
425 by the 2033 will give you 182 or 17.17.
There you go. Not rocket science, right? A little more confident in doing this. You just need to know what numbers to plug in the T formula, and then this becomes a lot easier. But what made this tricky is the problem gives you all kinds of other figures that you do not need to know to figure out the GRM. This is how they try to see if you know what the hell you're talking about. That you're not just trying to fake it till you make it there on the exam. Because if you don't know how to calculate GRM, you're not going to get this. If you're one of those people who just tap in every number in the calculator trying to see if it'll come out to one of the answer options that they have, the multiple choice, you're not going to get it. Because you don't need this number, you don't need this number, you don't need this number. You only need the value of the property and the annual rent to figure out this. And you have to reverse engineer that annual rent to getting the monthly. Boom. That's what made it a little trickier. But was it that hard?
Not really.
You just got to remember the formula now, right? What to put in the T formula. You have two formulas, T formula, reverse T formula. Reverse T formula is only good for figuring out the GRM. All right, so we got a couple more of these. So here's the question. An investor says he'll purchase this property if he gets an 8% return on his investment. I want to know, will he get it? And what is the actual cap rate on this property? So if the property sells for $425,000, has 4 units with incomes of 2 3-bedroom units renting for $1,200 a month each. I already figured it out for you. That's 1,500 times 2, that's 3,000. And then there's 2 2-bedroom units renting for $1,200 a month each. Times 2, that's 2,400. Add 3,000 plus 2,400, that's 6,400. Times that by 12, it's 64,800. So here's the monthly income and here's the annual income. And then I added up already all the expenses for you too. Made it easier for you. Total gross operating expenses are 23,520. So what do I do to figure out the cap rate? What do I plug into the T formula?
The small annual,
Tell me what number goes on top, what number goes on bottom.
so it would be your 5,400 on top.
We're trying to figuring out the cap rate. So what number do we put up top?
Hold on, let me go back to the,
It's the small number on the top.
But what is the small number? Tell me which number that is. What number do we need to put up top? Here's your gross monthly rent. Here's your gross annual rent. Here's your expenses. Here's the sale price. What number goes where?
oh. Hold on. So you would take the 64,800 minus the GOE, right?
Yeah? You see I'm doing it on the screen right here in the center.
3,520. That would give you 41,280, and that would go on top. And yeah,
And so what's the cap rate on the property?
then
Will
divide
this
it by the
investor, should we recommend that he buys this property? Will he get an 8% return on his investment?
he'll get a 9.7 return.
So that's a big fat yes.
Yes.
Okay, that's pretty good. That's a pretty strong return on the investment, 9.7%. You know any banks that are paying that? All right, so let's also calculate the GRM for this property, the same property.
Okay,
The GRM for this property. How do we calculate that? What numbers do we put in the reverse T formula here?
the value on top,
Okay, value on top, and then what else?
and then your gross monthly income, which is the 54, 5,400,
Uh,
and then divide that.
and what do you get?
78.7.
There you go. See, be confident in it, but you just gotta know those numbers, what goes into the T formula. And then it becomes easier and easier the more you do it.
Yeah. So there's a couple things to remember, like the where, try not to mix them up.
Yeah, which numbers do you need to go in the T formula? You know, the net annual net operating income goes up top. So how do you calculate annual net? What is the net? It's your income after expenses. So we need to have our annual income and our annual expenses, and you subtract that from the income, and you're left with the net. And then that goes up there. And then you put the property value down there to figure out the cap rate. For figuring out the GRM, you put the property value up top, and the gross monthly income down the bottom. All right, so we know that 9.7% cap, that's your capitalization rate or your rate of return on your money. So that investor's money is $425,000 that they use to buy the property. Okay, so they're going to be getting 9.7% interest on that. That's pretty good. That's their cap rate. That's their return on investment. That's their interest, right? All right, so the GRM, that's used to compare two properties when you don't have all this information. So let's just say that you have a property that has 9.7% cap rate. And it comes up on the market, and we don't know what its income and expenses are. So using the reverse T formula and GRM to figure out how much to offer on that other property that comes up on the market, that's around the same approximate return on the investment. Okay, without having all the information, without having all those exact figures. The GRM is a rough tool. It's not meant to be an exact tool, but it'll get you in the ballpark, give you educated guesstimates of those figures. So we can agree that in the same neighborhood, one 4-unit building should have approximately the same expenses as another 4-unit building in the same neighborhood, right? And a 3-bedroom or a 2-bedroom should be renting for approximately the same amount or in the same ballpark, right? In the same area. A 2-bedroom, you know, so the going rental rate. What do 3 bedrooms or 2 bedrooms go for in this area? It should be approximately the same ballpark. This is not 100% accurate. Sure, those figures could be off a little bit, but it'll get us a good educated guesstimate to get us in the ballpark to know what the actual figures are. When we don't know what the actual figures are, to get us in the ballpark of these values. So the question would be, how much should we offer to get approximately the same 9%, 9.7% cap rate for another 4-unit building that comes up for sale in the area? However, this one has 3 3-bedroom units and 1 2-bedroom. Remember, the previous one had two 3-bedrooms and 2 2-bedrooms. So this one has It's also a 4-unit building because you can only use the GRM to compare it to another similar 4-unit building. However, this 4-unit building doesn't have 2 3-beds and 2 2-beds. It has 3 3-bedrooms and 1 2-bedroom. So how much should we offer? Well, let's first calculate what the gross monthly income is. If you have 3 3-bedroom units renting for $1,500 a month each, that's $4,500. And 1 2-bedroom renting for $1,200 a month. You add them up to get the gross monthly income of $5,700 a month. Now, the previous property on the previous slide that got us a 9.7% cap, what was that GRM again? What was it, 87 something or 78 something? You guys recall?
The GRM was 78.70.
All right, so we're going to take the gross monthly income, times it by that GRM of 78.70, and this will tell us how much we should make an offer on to tell us how much this property is worth in order to get approximately that same 9.7% cap rate. So we shouldn't make an offer more than $448,590, and that'll get us in that 9.7% cap rate range. All right. Now, keep in mind the exact expenses of this building or the exact rents. But we know that, rents should be in the same ballpark, for a 3-bedroom or a 2-bedroom unit in the same neighborhood. Should be in the same ballpark area, right? And the expenses to operate one 4-unit building versus another 4-unit building next door in the same neighborhood should be approximately in the same ballpark as well, those same expenses. So this is a quick, rough, dirty tool to get these figures without having to sign contracts, non-disclosure agreements, and these legal contracts just to figure out what the numbers are. You can figure out the numbers of another neighboring property in the area that's similar, that does publish all the information, and then use that information to figure out the cap rate, and then figure out the GRM for that property, and then apply that GRM to this property. See how you could use it in practical use? I mean, it's easy to figure out the GRM. Now I showed you how you could actually put it into practical use to use it in your business. Instead of calling up the other agent and asking for what the financials are and what the rents are so that we could figure out the cap rate to determine if it's something that we even want to show to our client, and they want us to sign these contracts, these non-disclosure legal agreements first, not to disclose that information to anybody. Instead of doing all that, we can just take another listing, do all the calculations on it, figure out the GRM, and then apply it to this one to figure out if what's the ballpark value, and then you could compare this to what their asking price is, or just make an offer on it that's right here, and then they could, you'll be in that 9.7% cap rate range. Pretty cool tool. It's not meant to be accurate. It's a quick, rough, dirty tool to get you what you need. All right, so now let's do a different type of math problem called the cost approach. We're going to figure out not the cost approach. We're going to figure out depreciation and appreciation. Now, these are just some of the basic rules before we get into the nitty-gritty of it. In order to calculate appreciation or depreciation, appreciation is an increase of value and depreciation is a decrease in value. The math problem you'll probably get is a depreciation problem. So there are 2 ways to calculate these. You could use a straight line method or the compounding method. Compounding method's more accurate. The straight line method, it's simpler to solve. The straight line method you would always use if they don't tell you which method to use in the problem. So unless they tell you to use the compound method, you're going to use the straight line method, the easier one. Not that the compound method is that hard, it's just a couple more steps. So a straight line method assumes each year's appreciation or depreciation is a percentage of the original value. So to solve, you multiply the annual percentage of appreciation or depreciation by the number of years it appreciated or depreciated. It's pretty straightforward. In the compounding method, it's more accurate, but it requires repeating step number 3 once for each year, which we didn't get to yet. So step number 2 is, are you trying to figure out a past value or a future value on the property? All right. Well, actually, wait, hold on a second. That's not step 2, that's step 3. Step 2 is, are you trying to determine appreciation or depreciation? Remember, when calculating value, value means 100%. You're trying to calculate all of it. So if it's depreciating, you're going to put a minus sign. You're going to subtract from the percentage of depreciation. If it appreciated, you're going to do the plus sign. You're going to do 100% to the value. Now, if you're trying to determine a value in the past, you divide. And if you determining a value, current or future value of a property, you're going to multiply. I know you're getting lost. Multiply what? Divide what? Well, these are just the basic rules, okay? So to calculate depreciation, you subtract from 100%. To calculate appreciation, you add to 100%. To figure out a value in the past, you know, if they tell you how much the property's worth today, but they want you to tell them how much you bought it for, you're going to be dividing. If they tell you you bought it for so much in the past and they want to know how much it's worth today, you're going to multiply. So here are these steps again here on the side. You determine the value based on 100%. Then you got to determine if you're using straight line or compound method. Okay. So in this problem here, it says if you purchased a property 3 years ago and it depreciated in value 2% per year, and today's value is $400,000, how much did you purchase the property for? Use the straight line method. So how do we calculate this? Well, if you purchase a property 3 years ago and it depreciated 2% per year. So the first step we do is where you write down, well, they said to use the straight line method. So this is a little bit easier. You write down the number or the percentage of depreciation and you multiply it by the number of years it depreciated. That gives you 6%. And it depreciated. So next step we do is are we going to add or subtract this 6% from 100? 100%. Because remember, value equals 100%.
Right.
So we're going to subtract 6% from 100%. That gives us 94%. Now, are we trying to figure out a value in the past or a current or future value based on the question? Well, the question tells you what today's value is. It says, how much did you buy it for? So we're figuring out a value in the past, right?
Yes.
So we're going to divide. We're going to take the current value, divide it by this percentage, 0.94 or 94%. And because it's straight line method, you do that problem once and that's it. It's just multiple steps, but they're pretty simple. You just got to know, divide to figure out a number in the past, multiply to figure out a future number. And anytime we're figuring out value, we're basing it off of 100%. So if it depreciated, we're going to write a subtract, we're going to put a minus sign there. And by how much? Well, you take the rate of depreciation, times it by the numbers of years of depreciation. That you're doing that in the straight line method. If this was the compounding method, you would not do that. You would just take the rate of depreciation, subtract it from 100%, and then you do this math problem once for each year. So let's try that out using the compounding method now. So you take 100% minus the rate of depreciation, 2%, that gives us 0.98 or 98%. Today's value is 400,000. So we're going to divide that by, because we're still trying to figure out, why are we dividing? Because we're trying to still figure out a value in the past. So you're dividing it by 0.98. And we're going to do this math problem once for each year. So this is 1 year ago. So now we take that figure divided by 0.98. This was 2 years ago. Now we take that figure divided by 0.98, and that's your answer. So that's how you calculate it using the straight line method and the compound method. If the problem does not specifically tell you to use the compounding method or straight line method, you'll use the straight line method. You want to snap a picture of this one?
Got it.
Yeah, and if need be, you could always watch the video again to walk you through how to calculate. So let's do a couple more. There we go. If you purchased the property 3 years ago and it depreciated in value 2% per year, and today's value is $380,000, how much did you buy the property for? I want you guys to see if you can figure this out on your own. Let me know, and then I'll walk through the problem. Got all the instructions there on the left side and here. So you're using the compound method, though. It says use the compound method. What's the first step?
To figure out the 3-year percentage.
So what's the first step? The first thing you should always do is you just write down 100% first, because you're trying to calculate value. So the first step is you write down 100%, and then what? Are you adding to or subtracting from 100%?
Subtracting.
And how much are you subtracting from 100%?
6%.
Whoa. That's using the straight line method. Remember, compounding method, you do not take that shortcut of multiplying the rate of depreciation times the number of years. You do the math problem 3 times, once for each year. So you got to do the 100% minus 2%. And then what?
Okay, got it. And then, then you divide what you get another 2 times.
So 380 divided by 0.98, today's value divided by, because we're trying to figure out a value in the past. And we got to do that how many times?
A total of 3 times.
A total of 3 times, once for each year. Once, twice, thrice. Okay, you just got to do it a couple of times and you'll get a hang of it. All right, let's see another problem here. If you purchased the property 3 years ago for $380,000 and it depreciated 2% per year using the compound method, what is it worth today? Seems like the same problem, but it's a little bit different. What do we do? Walk me through it, and then I'll reveal slowly. What's the first step?
Okay, is the same problem, you're saying?
It seems like the same thing, but it's not.
Oh, the one okay.
They're asking something a little bit different.
I couldn't see it, got it. I see.
So what's the first step in trying to solve this? When you're calculating appreciation or depreciation, you're trying to calculate value. So when you calculate value, what is value? What is value?
The worth.
Yeah,
What it's worth today?
value is 100%. Because anytime you're trying to figure out value, you're trying to figure out all of it. So it's 100%. So you always start by writing down 100%. And in this case, it depreciated. So you're subtracting that 2% per year. So you're subtracting 2% from 100%. They say to use the compound method. So you're not taking the rate of depreciation and timesing it by the number of years. Instead, you're going to do the math problem once for each year. So what did we do so far? Now what do we do? What's the next step? Come on. You guys got it. What's the next step? What do we do with that 98% that we just figured out? Come on, look at the previous problem. What did we do? What was the next step after we figured out the percentage?
We divide it
By 98.
by 98.
Okay, well, what is the question asking? What is this question asking? How is it different than the previous question?
It's asking for use per year. No, wait, the compound method.
Well, they're both the compound method, but how does the first problem differ from this one? What were they asking for with the first problem? Read the question, number one.
It was asking for the past value.
Yeah, they asked how much did you purchase the property for? So what is this problem asking?
This is asking for the current value.
So this one's asking how much it's worth today.
Yes. Yeah.
So what do we do?
It,
What do we do with the number they gave us? The purchase price. You bought it 3 years ago for 380,000. It depreciated 2% per year using the compound method. What is it worth today? So what's the next step? We take the 380 and what do we do with it?
so it depreciated like 2% of 380 every year.
So what do we do? How do we calculate that? We only wrote down 100% because that's the total value. And we know it depreciated 2% per year. So we subtracted 2% from 100%. That gave us 98%. So now what do we do with the 380? Come on, what do we do up here?
You divide.
Well,
I'm sorry, you multiply.
what does dividing do? It figures out the number in the past, and the multiplication figures out the current or future value. So they gave you the number.
Yeah, so you
Yeah, so you
multiply 3 times.
So it
Okay.
depreciated 7,600 every year. So
Okay, so-
7,600 into 3.
So we're going to take 380,000 and multiply it by 0.98 once for each year. So This problem figured out a number in the past. This one figured out the value in the current or future value, right? So that's why we multiplied here. We were trying to figure out a current or future value. We divided here because we were trying to figure out a value in the past. But either way, anytime you're figuring out appreciation or depreciation, your very first step is you write down 100% because you're trying to figure out all of the value. And then if it appreciated, you would be adding to 100%. If it depreciated, you subtract. Now, what's the percentage that you're adding or subtracting? Well, if you're using the compound method, you just take the rate of depreciation that they tell you. And then you do the problem once for each year. And whether you divide or multiply, that depends on are you figuring out a past value or a future value. Now, if they said to use the straight line method, you take the rate of depreciation that they give you, times it by the number of years, and then you do the math problem one time. That's the straight line method.
So then, teacher, I have a question. So then, on the question 2, which one is the current, like the now, worth today now? Is it 357 then?
Yeah, 357, 653 is the correct answer.
3 years ago. Oh, okay. I see. Because that was okay.
Yeah, it works the same thing like your commissions. Like here, if you're going to try to build a commission problem for yourself, it works the same way. Let me minimize this for a second. I'm going to pull up my whiteboard. I'm going to show you. Let me open up a blank whiteboard so I can draw on screen in front of you here. Actually, I don't even need to pull up that whiteboard. I think Zoom's got a whiteboard built into it. So let's see, host tools. Where's the whiteboard? How's the whiteboard? Come on, Zoom. Oh, here we go. Whiteboard. New whiteboard. Okay. All right, so we got a whiteboard up in front of us. Okay. If okay, so if you have, let's see, a problem here. Let me give you a problem. I'm going to type it here. If you got a listing for $300,000, all right, $300,000 listing. And the seller, you want to calculate, the seller wants to get $300,000. Now, this is not the proper way that you list properties or determine their value. But let's just say the seller wants $300,000. They don't care what you charge for commission as long as they get their $300,000. How much would you list? Owner wants for their home and doesn't care what you charge for commission as long as they get their $300,000. How much would you list this property for if you were going to charge 6% commission? You guys can all read that, right? You guys can see that clear on your end?
Yes,
The
yeah,
whiteboard?
yeah, it's very clear.
So how much would you charge? How would you figure this out? What would you do? How do you figure it out? Do you do 300,000 times 6% and add that? Or what do you do? How do you figure this out? Give me an idea.
The T formula that you showed us?
No, that's not going to help you out here. But yeah, that's not going to help you out because look, if you did the T formula, right? What number would you put where? 300,000 down here?
Yeah, bottom left. No, well, yeah, but
And then you put what? 6% over here?
on the bottom right,
So all that is 300,000 times 6%. And then what do you get?
18,000.
So you get 18,000. So what is that? So what are you going to do? Are you going to take 300,000 plus 18,000?
Well, if you were going to charge.
Because if you were to do this, that's $318,000 there now. But now, let's say you sell the property for 318. Subtract your 6%. And what do you get?
300,000?
You're plugging it into the calculator. 318,000 minus 6% equals 298,920. Because 6% of $318,000 times 6%, that's $19,080, not 18,000. It actually comes out to a higher commission of 19,800. So that's not the way you do it. That math, 19,080, I'm sorry. That math would never work. So what's the possibility to try to build in that value? See, this is how I'm trying to show you this, like when we're doing the depreciation and appreciation, it works the same way with that percentage. You always got to start with 100%. So if we were to start with 100%, and you're charging them 6%, that equals what? 94%, right? So now, if you do the 300,000 and you work your way in 300,000, because that's how much the owner wants for their property, right?
Yeah.
So how much should you sell it for? 300,000 divided by 94% or 0.94. $300,000 divided by 94% or 0.94. That means that we should sell the property for 319,000. This is the way that you build it into the value to figure it out. 148. 148.9 or 149, but it's rounded to. Right? Now, if you subtract that 6% from that, if you sell it for that amount, that should be your listing price, right? Or sale price. Now, trying to move the chalkboard. Can't exactly. How does this thing work? Okay. Now, if you subtract 6% from that, you'll get 300,000 on the money. So the owner will get their property value or what they want for it. That's the way you build in the commission. Not that that's the way you're supposed to price homes. But if an owner says, I want to get $300,000, I don't care what you charge for your commission. Okay, so that means that we need to sell your house for $319,149. And then you subtract 6% from that, and I'll get my 300, and you'll get your 300,000, and I'll get my 6%. Because if you do it this way, if you just take 300,000 times 6%, take that amount, which is 18,000, and add it to the 300,000. Well, now if you sell the house for 318,000, subtract 6%, well, the owner's getting 298,920. They're not getting 300,000. And you'll never get it right. So the way to calculate it exactly is you start with 100% of the value. You subtract the 6% that you want. That's 94%. So you take the amount divided by the 94, and that's how much you should sell it for. And then you can subtract your 6%, and it'll still work out to the exact number that the owner wanted. See how that works?
Yeah, I see.
All right. Now, how the hell do I get out of this? Let's see. Let's close that whiteboard. Let's see. And you open up the slideshow, full screen again. We already did these problems. So that's why we always start with 100% here, and then we subtract the rate of depreciation, and then we divide it to figure out how much you purchased it for, because we're trying to build that. It depreciated 2% per year, so we're trying to add that 2% back in. And it's a similar way as that math problem for commissions I just showed you, how you could build it back in. This is why it's more accurate to do it this way. You don't just take 2% times 3%, then just add that to and then multiply that by 380. That'll never give you the right number. Okay. Multiplication is trying to figure out the number in the current value or the future. Percentage is trying to figure out a value in the past, but it always starts on calculating value. You always got to start with 100% and write 100%. And then you subtract if it depreciated, you add if it appreciated. So you guys want to snap a picture of this slide before we go on to the next one?
I did.
Yes.
So, okay, I thought we had another math problem here. Okay, I guess that was it on calculating appreciation. So, appraisals are conducted by skilled licensed professionals called appraisers. Appraisers must be licensed. Appraisers charge fees for appraising, and there's several types of appraisal licenses. You guys remember the 4 types of appraisal licenses?
There's general, residential.
Well, what do you start as? How do you start? What's the very first appraiser type license?
The trainee.
So yeah, an apprentice trainee, and then you could move up to
Residential.
and then you move up to a
General. But for that, you need a college degree.
certified residential,
Certified residential.
and then the certified general appraiser.
Yep.
Okay. So, CMAs and BPOs are estimates of value done by us as real estate agents, as licensees. We must never call them appraisals. As a matter of fact, we got to put a disclosure in them. This is not an appraisal and should not be considered the equivalent of one. Why? Because the appraising industry sued the real estate industry. So the Real Estate Commission even put rules together that we must never call it an appraisal. So we need to also add a remark to every CMA or BPO, broker's price opinion, that we do, that this is not an appraisal and should not be considered the equivalent of one which is done by a licensed appraiser. So why do people get appraisals done? Well, for various reasons. For estate purposes, when someone dies, to figure out their taxable value of their property. Oh, you know what? I forgot to check Trump's big, beautiful bill. I believe he was trying to do away with estate taxes. I didn't check that. I wonder if he was able to get that in that bill. I know it's hard to pull money away from politicians, so he's trying to give people tax breaks and everything. And he did pass the biggest tax break in American history in that big, beautiful bill that he recently passed. Now, what he dubbed it as, he calls it the big, beautiful bill. One of the things he's trying to do is do away with estate taxes. Look, you worked out hard all your life to provide for your family, right? For all the things that you have, you paid taxes when you worked for it. They took it out of your income. And now you bought stuff with it. You pay taxes again on that. And now they want to tax you again when you leave it to your children or your family members or your heirs or whoever, right? So that's not right. A lot of people in New Jersey farms are going to the wayside. We're known as the Garden State because of all of our farms. We're losing farms at an incredible rate because of development and abuses of eminent domain, so that they could take properties and turn them into low-income housing, like you see is going on right now in Cranberry, right? So a lot of times when the parents die and they leave the farm to their children, they have to pay estate taxes on the value of the farm, and they may not be able to afford it in order to keep that farm. So they're forced to sell it then, and that farm went out of business. Okay, so it's sad that we got federal estate taxes, but the state of New Jersey also has estate taxes, and they're some of the highest as well. So Trump, I think he was trying to do away with the federal estate tax. Was he able to do it? I don't know. I got to take a look in that big, beautiful bill to see if he was able to do that or not. Let's see, divorce proceedings. When real estate, when people get divorced and they're going to sell the property and then split the revenue from it, or one of them is going to be keeping it, they need to pay the other their share of the property to buy them out, right? Because when you own property as married couples, how do you own it? By the entirety, tenancy by the entirety. But when you get divorced, it reverts to a tenancy in common. So you sell the property and then you divide the proceeds amongst the those owners. For financing, when you get a loan to buy a house, or for taxation purposes, the ad valorem tax, it's based on the value of the property, right? So we need to find out the value by doing an appraisal. For relocation purposes, when they transfer employees, you got corporate relocations, companies that may even buy out the property. So they need to know the value. For condemnation reasons, that's when they're taking the property by eminent domain, and fair compensation has to be given by the government to the property owner whose property is being taken. For insurance reasons, to estimate the possible replacement costs. For damage or loss, to support income tax deductions. And for feasibility studies, to study possible consequences of a particular use of a property. And remember, anytime you have an appraiser that's going to appraise a property for a buyer that's getting an FHA loan, they also have to have that special FHA designation on their license as well. Let's see, New Jersey now requires that appraisers either be licensed or certified by the state. Well, they have for as long as I've been alive. I think they started that in 1930. Something like that. They started requiring licensing for appraisal. So just write this over here on page 317, reasons for appraisals along the side of that. All right. So how does an appraiser prepare for doing an appraisal? Well, they got to state what the problem is that they're trying to solve. List the data needed as well as the sources that they need to get the information from. Then they need to gather, record, and verify that necessary data, determine the property's highest and best use, estimate the land's value, estimate the value of each of the three using each of the three approaches. Then they reconcile an estimated value to determine which is the best value to use, the most profitable one, and then they report the final value estimate on their appraisal report. And their appraisal report is called the Uniform Residential Appraisal Report. This is the federal document that they're required to use. So it's an appraisal form required by many governmental agencies. It illustrates the detailed information required of an appraisal of residential property. And it looks like this. Well, not like that. I guess it'll be on the next slide. But here, I guess on page 318, we could highlight Uniform Standards of Professional Appraisal Practice, USPAP. Remember that? We need to know MAI and USPAP has something to do with appraisers. So USPAP, USPAP, that stands for Uniform Standards of Professional Appraisal Practice. And this is a class that appraisers need to take every 2 years. Got it? You guys find that?
Got it.
Okay, and on the next page, 319, you could see a sample of this Uniform Residential Appraisal Report. It looks kind of like that CMA that we were doing earlier, right? Where we had the subject property and all the details of the subject property you got to lay out here. And then you got to have at least 3 comparable sales properties, and we make the adjustments for the differences. But they got a lot more information that appraisers put here, like market trends and, arm's length transaction information. And let's see, there's a lot of other information and data that they also add here to their reports that we don't usually have on ours. So look at that. Although appraising of property has existed since the concept of property ownership, appraising as an organized profession began as a result of a huge number of foreclosures during the Great Depression of 1930s. well, actually, it was 1920s leading into the 1930s. I guess that's when the foreclosures were happening. So appraising has now become a highly specialized branch of real estate. So the professional designation of qualified appraisers is traditionally made through membership in appraisal societies, that MAI. Many appraisers become members of MAI, the Member of the Appraising Institute. And SRA, a senior residential appraiser for general and residential appraisals, respectively. Specific credentials may be required when expert testimony is needed in court. Appraisers can often serve as expert witnesses pertaining to the value, reporting the value. Now, New Jersey requires that appraisals comply with state standards and be performed by state licensed or state certified appraisers. An exception allowed in the rare event where a broker's price opinion, a BPO, is acceptable to the lender when they don't want to pay for an appraisal. You know, like when they want to figure out if they're going to, the homeowner has enough equity that they could drop their private mortgage insurance, you know, or they're refinancing. They may, instead of getting an appraisal, just get an estimate of value from a real estate agent that they'll pay them through their broker, a BPO for BPO. Now, the BPO should include a statement that indicates that the report should not be considered the equivalent of an appraisal prepared by a New Jersey licensed or certified real estate appraiser. So the statement should appear in print size as large as the main text on the report. And any fees involved are payable to the agent's broker of record, because nobody can pay you except your broker, right? You can only get paid through your broker. So all real estate appraisers for any purpose must be done by licensed or certified real estate appraisers. The only exception is for a CMA provided to sellers or buyers when we're trying to help them determine the value of a property to sell it, to list it at, or for buyers, what kind of offer to make, or when BPOs are ordered by lenders. Okay. You could actually get credit towards getting an appraiser license by doing a bunch of CMAs over your career as real estate agents. You know, I don't know exactly how that works, but here, if you want more information about a profession of appraising, you could go to www.njconsumeraffairs.gov/REA for real estate appraising. All right. And once again, here are the 4 types of appraiser licenses. We already ran down on these. I'm not going to waste a whole lot of time on there, other than knowing that who can only appraise residential properties under $1 million. Who can only appraise residential properties under $1 million? Come on, guys, you should know this. Plus, you got it in front of you. Apprentice trainee or a licensed residential appraiser. Okay, certified residential appraisers, it requires one of the certified licenses to appraise residential properties over $1 million. And a certified general appraiser's license is required to appraise commercial properties, unless you have one of these other license types and you're working under a certified general appraiser. Then you could also do appraisals in commercial property under their supervision and tutelage. All right, so in every case, all the appraiser licenses are required to take that 15-hour national USPAP course every 2 years. And once again, there's the rundown of all the different appraiser licenses and what they can and can't do. So we just ran down this and already read through this slide, so I don't have to go over that again. So how do real estate licensees value properties? You may want to snap a picture of this. It gives you that full explanation that everybody keeps forgetting. A CMA is a comparative market analysis. This is a valuation used by real estate licensees to determine the current market value of a property using the sales comparison approach. We usually do this complimentary for free for our potential clients. A BPO we do when lenders order them in exchange for a fee. We call it a broker's price opinion. A little more math involved for doing BPOs for lenders. In any case, BPOs or CMAs, we got to have that disclosure that this is not an appraisal and should not be considered the equivalent of one that is performed by a licensed or certified appraiser. Okay, I got a couple math problems here at the end of the slideshow here. If you guys wanted to do a couple more math problems on your own, here's some more of those calculating depreciation problems. Here's the question. How much was it purchased for? I got it all worked out over here already for you, so you could try to look at the question and then not look at the answer and try to figure it out on your own. Okay? You want some more practice there. And that's using the compound method, and then here it is using the straight line. And then here, let's give another one. Let's see if you guys can do this. So wake up, let's do this, and then we're done with this chapter. So
And I'm sorry.
yeah,
You said if it doesn't mention if to use straight line or compound, always use the straight line.
correct.
Okay.
Correct. So here's the question for you. You purchased a property 3 years ago. It depreciated 2% per year. Today's value is $375,000. How much did you purchase the property for? Calculate this using the straight line method and then do it using the compound method. So first using the straight line method, go. In this slide, I don't have all the instructions for you. So hopefully you paid attention and hopefully you remember it. So I'll give you guys a minute, try to figure it out. If you're stalled and you need a little guidance, ask me. Don't just sit there. You guys working on it or stalled out?
I think I got it.
Okay, so what's the first step?
So for the straight line, it's figuring out the percentage, which is 94.
So what's the first thing you write down on a piece of paper when trying to figure this out?
Oh, 2% times 3 years.
Okay, and then what?
and that'll give you the 6%.
Okay,
Then you take the value, 375.
oh, hold on. What are you doing with that 6%? You said that you multiplied 3 years times the,
Oh, you minus it off the 100%.
because it depreciated.
Oh,
So that's subtracting from 100%, right? And then what?
Then you take the value, 375, divide that by the percentage of 94%, which is 0.94. And it'll give you 398,936.
That's correct. You got it. See on screen, I just revealed it.
Yeah.
Okay, so what would you do with the compound method?
So with the compound method, instead of doing the 3 times 2, you're gonna do the 100 minus the 2%. That's 90.98%.
Uh-huh.
And you're gonna take the 375, which is the value, divide that by 0.98, and you'll get, the first one is 382,653. And then you take that 382,653, divide it again by 0.98,
Uh-huh. And then
and you
again,
get 398. Yep, there you go.
and then you do it again. Yep, that's correct. So you got it. It's not that
It's just-
difficult. It's just a matter of remembering the steps
Yeah.
there. But it's not that
Exactly.
difficult, right? It's fairly simple math and you're using a calculator, so it's
Yeah.
remembering the steps. Remember, you always start with 100%. That's the first step. Write down 100%. And then you need to figure out, are you adding to or subtracting from 100%? And how much are you adding to or subtracting from 100% would depend on, are you using the straight line or compound method? Because if it's a straight line, you just take the rate of depreciation and times it by the number of years. And then that you subtract from 100. If it's
Now,
compounding, you just take the rate of depreciation and write it there. Yeah, go ahead. What was the question?
if it's appreciation, you multiply, right?
Well, if it's appreciation, you're adding to the value. Value is
Adding.
100%. So you're just adding this
Okay,
subtraction. See, it depreciated, so you wrote a minus sign here.
got
If
it. But you
if
still
it-
divide?
If it appreciated, you still divide. You
Okay,
still divide when you're trying to figure out a number in the past. And you
Okay.
multiply if you're trying to figure out a future, current or future value.
got it.
Okay, so
Yeah,
current,
that's right.
whether you multiply or divide is only to figure out the past value or current value.
Got it.
Okay, if it appreciated or depreciated is whether you put a minus sign or a plus sign here next to 100%. That's why I said always start by writing 100%. Then figure out, are you adding or subtracting from 100% to know what symbol to put there. And then you figure out the depreciation. Is it the rate of depreciation? If it was a straight line, you just take the rate times the number of years. If it's compounding, you just take the rate and subtract that or add that to 100%. And then continue on. All right, that concludes chapter 16 here. Let's do the key terms to review for chapter 16. There are 2 key terms to review before we get started. Next to letter J, I want you to write to compare income producing properties. It says analysis of rental income used roughly in sales comparison approach. We're going to write to compare income producing properties. To compare income producing properties.
I'm sorry, which one was that one? The rate,
Uh,
the letter?
J. First, key terms 1, letter J. You're going to
compare income producing property.
to compare income producing properties. Correct. You're going to write that right after the word approach.
Okay.
And then next to number 13, where it says income approach, I want you to write after that CAP or GRM. CAP, CAP in capital letters, or in all capital letters, GRM. And then let's get started, shall we? Process of estimating value. Process of estimating value.
Appraisal,
2 is A, it's an appraisal. Rate of return demanded by investors in a particular area. Rate of return demanded by investors in a particular area. How do we calculate rate of return?
the GIM? No,
It's the capitalization or cap rate. 4 is B. A similar nearby property recently sold. What do we call that?
comparable,
It's a comparable or a comp. Yes, 5 is C. Extra that contributes to the owner's satisfaction, like clean air, a nice view, and so on. A hot tub, a jacuzzi, swimming pool, heated floors, a bidet. What do we call these extras that contribute to the owner's satisfaction and enjoyment?
is that the cost approach? Or amenity.
It's an amenity. 1 is D. An independent person trained to provide an unbiased estimate or opinion of value.
That's the appraiser.
Yep, 3 is E, appraiser. Analysis of income, including rental and other factors. Not just the rental of the real estate, but other outside factors as well. Analysis of income, including rental, as well as other factors that are not particularly related to the real estate. It's the gross income multiplier, the GIM, the gross income multiplier. Brian Giotti, you still here? Let's see, a loss of value due to any cause or condition. What do we call loss of value, period?
Depreciation,
Depreciation, 7 is G. A loss of value due to factors beyond the property's boundaries.
external
Yes. Obsolescence, external obsolescence. 8 is H. A loss of value due to worn or outmoded, I guess it's a weird way of saying outdated features.
Mhm. Functional obsolescence.
Functional obsolescence, 9 is I. Analysis of rental income used roughly in the sales comparison approach to compare income producing properties.
The income approach,
Well, which,
Gross rent,
which one?
oh, the gross
gross
rent
rent
multiplier.
multiplier,
The gross rent multiplier, the GRM. 11 is J. Appraisal technique that analyzes the cost to build.
cost approach,
It's the cost approach. 6 is K. Analysis of value of property using return on investments.
The cap or GRM,
Cap GRM, which is the income approach to value. So 13 is L. And a use of land that yields the most money possible. What do we call that?
highest and
The
best use.
highest and best use, correct. 12 is M. All right, let's do the key terms too. What a property actually sells for. What a property actually sells for.
Market price,
Market price is the selling price. It's what it actually sells for. One is A. A loss of value due to wear and tear.
physical deterioration,
Physical deterioration. 3 is B. Location and the buyer's willingness to pay more for certain locations.
situs,
Situs, correct. 8 is C. You say when we find that perfect location, we're gonna mispronounce it and say we're gonna sit us right here. Situs or sit us.
it's
Right.
situs, okay.
8 is C. Analysis of values received by different appraisal approaches. Analysis of values received by using different appraisal approaches. What do you call it? Use more than one approach. to
Comparison?
value. When you use more than one of the 3 approaches to value on the same property, what do we call that?
Reconciliation,
It is reconciliation. 4 is D. The present worth of future benefits. Present worth of future benefits.
value,
Value. 11 is E. The cost to rebuild using today's materials and techniques.
replacement,
Replacement costs. 5 is F. Correct. A price that would be paid by an informed buyer. How do we inform buyers of the price that they should be making when they make an offer?
market,
market value,
Market value. And we do that by doing a CMA, right? The CMA is used to determine market value. 2 is G. And in a perfect world, analysis of that market value and market price would be one and the same. The market price is what they actually end up paying for it. So 2 is G, correct. Market value. Appraisal technique that analyzes the sales price of comparable properties.
sales comparison approach,
The sales comparison approach. 7 is H. The cost to rebuild exactly using the materials just like the original. If they had marble floors, you're replacing it with marble floors.
reproduction cost,
Reproduction costs. 6 is I, correct. Principle that no one pays more when the same can be had for less. Remember that graphic I showed you where you had 3 properties, all different prices, they're all exactly the same. Which one would you buy?
the substitution,
substitution,
Substitution, correct. 10 is J. Parcel of real estate being appraised. What do we call that?
subject property,
The subject property. It's the subject of our conversation. It is the subject property. 9 is K, and that concludes chapter 16. Yay!